Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. Today we are going to talk about key insights and into APAC's global services landscape. Specifically, we are going to talk about some of our key issues for the year 2024. My name is Chirajit. I go by CJ. I'm dialing in from a cold, cheery morning here in New Delhi. Together with me, I have Alicia Mittal. Alicia is a vice president with Everest Group and runs a significant part of our IT services research. Where are you dialing in from? Why don't you leave a comment in the chat? Just let us know where you are dialing in from today. And let's kick off. We'd be happy to receive a bunch of your questions, comments as we go along. Please keep your comments coming. We really want to make this engaging and helpful to all of us. With that out of the way, let me get us started. So, Alicia, what are you seeing in the market today? What are you seeing in the APAC market? Obviously, 2023 globally hasn't been the best of years. It's been a complicated macro environment. How do you think all of this is playing out in the APAC market?
Yeah, thank you for that question, CJ. And as you rightly said, right, the 2023 wasn't the best of years that APAC specifically in the world would have expected. The geopolitical situation wasn't the best. The inflations in different economies all over the world, overall consumer sentiments weren't very positive. Unfortunately, year 24, the sentiment seemed to be on both ends. There is cautiously optimistic enterprises seem to be. As we think about 2024 in APAC specifically, enterprises are quite concerned about the global macroeconomic situations again, specifically with China and the regional geopolitical situation. All of those seem to be a key hindrance towards having a very optimistic thinking of the future. However, at the same time, a lot of these net new initiatives around generative AI or around ESG, sustainability, overall changes in expectations from new technologies seems to be tending enterprise leadership thinking towards a much more positive direction. There seems to be also a positive change in terms of consumer purchasing behavior, consumer interest. These are certain aspects which are having a positive influence on the enterprise thinking about 2024. Net of it, it seems to be a mixed bag. There are certain negative influencers, there are also certain very strong positive influencers. The first half of 2024, as we anticipate, is going to be slightly more challenging. However, second half of 2024 is when we expect things to start turning around towards more positive, and overall the year to be better than what it was in 2023. So
So,
that's what.
in some ways, what you are saying is while the macroeconomic environment remains challenging, there are industry specific or business specific or technology specific themes
Yeah.
which are, kind of the silver lining, if you will, right? And that's really what's going to drive activity in the global services market in APAC.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, I think, a good point to discuss further, right? What exactly does it all mean for the global services industry? And here, when we say global services, it's both the outsourcing market as well as the shared services or GBS or GICs, it's called by different name, all of them together in 2024. Again, the sentiment seems to be shaping up differently. CJ, what's your thought about it? What are you seeing, expecting for the future?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up this point around GIC and GBS versus third party. So I think you mentioned a bunch of different issues, and when I really look at it, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, right? So first of all, there's a significant percentage of enterprises in APAC, which believe that they're actually going to increase their spend on global services significantly. So almost one third of them. On the other hand, there's an almost equal proportion, roughly a quarter of enterprises which is swinging in the diametrically opposite direction. So they're saying that they're going to reduce spend dramatically, right? Now, at the same time, it's kind of lumpy, uneven environment. And if we peel the onion a little bit further, what we see is that some of these nuances are also industry specific. So we believe there are significant tailwinds in the manufacturing industry, in life sciences, and in communications. While on the other hand, regulated industries like BFSI will continue to be very conservative given the broader macro risks involved. Automotive is also, somewhat muted in demand. Further, what we also see is that there's a sharper skew towards increased leverage of shared services establishments, right? So GBS or GCCs that enterprises have set up in APAC. And 60% of polled enterprises actually believe that they're going to increase spend with their GBS or GCCs, right? So there's a lot of, I think the key point is that while the headline statements can feel that it's pointing towards one direction, there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of unevenness in the market as we get into 2024. And one of the things that we'd be happy to help you guys with is, we are setting up complimentary briefings and discussions on global services forecasts for the APAC market. There's a link popping up in the chat shortly. Feel free to hit that link. It'll redirect you to a page where you can register your interest for this complimentary briefing. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it, as well as share our perspectives, and do a little bit of a double click beyond what we are talking about today when it comes to the demand environment in APAC, right? Um,
And
Back
CJ,
to
you talked about, yeah.
Right.
So, you talked about the 60%. That's a meaningfully large number. 60% of the enterprises really planning to spend or focus more on GDS centers as compared to their outsourcing service providers when it comes to, sourcing of services. Interestingly, this number, as I compared with the rest of the world, seems to be meaningfully high. On an average, across the other global economies, this number came out to be somewhere around 45 to 50%. In APAC, it came out to be slightly more higher, which is going to be interesting in terms of, why is it that some of these nuances are happening. Before we get there, let's discuss what are some of the we'll discuss what are some of the challenges when it comes to the shared services, the when it comes to the outsourcing services provider, and why is it that enterprises are thinking more about the shared services centers. But before that, this divergent view across the enterprises, that was again quite interesting, because globally we saw most of the enterprises planning to keep the investments rather muted. There weren't meaningful spikes that emerged in any of the geographies other than APAC in terms of a lot of spend in global services, whereas in APAC, manufacturing, life sciences, some of these enterprises really said that they plan to increase their investments by almost as much as 15%, their global services budget in the year 2024. And I think as we think about manufacturing specifically, right, the overall push towards ESG and sustainability and be able to achieve more resiliency in their supply chain, I'm seeing these as the key reasons why enterprises seem to be more interested in spending and increasing their budget, or having to increase their budget rather, in global services, to be able to make use of the newer technologies, to be able to build their supply chains in a more resilient manner. In fact, there's also a lot of shift in the operational assets within the APAC region, essentially bringing all the manufacturing closer to the consumer. That's a very important trend that's happening in the manufacturing and the life sciences industry, which is leading to a lot of downstream revenue opportunities for the global services industry as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, right? So I think some of it's very important to look at some of these industry specific nuances, right? And these are also enabled by technology. So what you are describing in manufacturing. I think that is also enabled significantly by what we are seeing as in the space of networks and 5G networks becoming more and more relevant, and what is happening with edge technologies, right? So those are some of the very interesting nuances that we're beginning to see in APAC. We have our first question from our audience. So Jay is asking us, are you seeing deal sizes shrinking? So what I think what we are beginning to see is there are certain deals which are popping up, which are driven more by consolidation and efficiency imperatives, right? Where the deal sizes are significantly large, but those are relatively few and far between. Whereas in most transformational scenarios, what we see is deals being broken down by shorter and shorter, durations, right? And it's a more agile approach where enterprises are seeking to not looking at big bang transformation, but trying to get ROI on an incremental basis before committing to larger transformational programs, right? So that's basically what's happening. Similar question from Varun asking us to talk about the fewer number of large deals in the APAC region. So I think again, Varun, that's part of the dynamic that we're seeing, right? So wherever we are seeing larger deals, that's primarily being driven from a consolidation and efficiency standpoint. Those are fewer and far between, right? Again, the modernization deals are again been broken down into smaller chunks, right? And I think part of the recipe for success here is a spirit of perseverance, because these are not going to happen through single large RFP motions, right? It's fundamentally now is I really can't overstate the importance of staying really close and involved with customers as you go along their transformation journeys, right? Because some of we are not seeing one of large deals, but what we're seeing is a series of small agile sprints leading to largish programs, but they take years and years to build momentum, right? Um,
It's a very interesting question from Jay. I think leading from what you just explained, CJ, does all of this really mean smaller and mid-sized players have an equal footing for small-sized deals? I think the idea, and this is a very interesting segue to the next point that we wanted to talk about, in terms of why a large number of enterprises seem to be shifting more towards GBS centers as compared to outsourcing service providers. Let's talk about that, and I think that will address the question Jay is asking. And then, if not, we can always share more details. Essentially, what's happening is, if we think about the past few years, and we look at the satisfaction rating from enterprises, specifically in APAC, it has been on a constant decline. And it's quite unfortunate, because there's been definitely a lot of investments that every service provider is doing. But what's the main reason for that dissatisfaction? What were the key expectations that enterprises had, which is not being met? Number one was lack of innovation. So there was a meaningful gap in terms of the expectations that enterprises had from an innovation standpoint, from proactive investment or service providers into the enterprise landscape, or a meaningful, significant amount of downtime in terms of onboarding the right kind of talent and being able to meet the expectations in time and with agility and with the right quality as well. And then poor communication, stakeholder management. I think that has been an issue with uh, a lot of different accounts, mid-size, large size, all of them, from across different sizes of service providers as well. Now, what it is resulting in is, because of this continued decline in satisfaction, two things are happening. A, that we talked about, that there tends to be a more shift towards the GBS centers as compared to the outsourcing service providers. B, a large number of enterprises, 61% of enterprises to be precise, say that they want to make meaningful changes to their service provider portfolio. And the changes could be in multiple ways. Either they will rebalance the work amongst their existing providers, or they may add a new provider but reshift work amongst their existing ones as well, or they may actually undertake meaningful vendor portfolio rationalization. Now that's a huge reshuffle and agitation of the portfolio in the APAC. If we extrapolate all of this to the different different industries within APAC, the different geographies within APAC, it's a meaningfully heterogeneous market, and there are a lot of different players in every enterprise context that we think about. And if that has to happen, would it be the larger players who will be winning? Would it be smaller players who will be winning? There is no one single answer to it. Ultimately, it is those expectations gap that exist. Those who are able to fulfill that will be the winners in this entire race in the year 2024. So those who are able to provide the right kind of innovation, the right kind of productivity improvement, the right kind of talent in time with agility are the ones that will have a better performance in the coming year, specifically in APAC. Yeah, CJ, what's your take on that? And I hope I did answer Jay's question.
Yeah, absolutely. You were right, Alicia, right? And what we're definitely seeing is globally, it's not just APAC. I think the world is becoming a more equal opportunity market, right? Where scale is not the single most important dimension. And the APAC market is no exception to that, right? And I think if you look at the profile of demand also, that is also evolving because we are seeing growth really coming from segments like cybersecurity, from segments like data analytics and AI. We are seeing demand for networking services. And what we are beginning to observe is that there is an increasing role for specialists to play rather than scaled generalists, right? A lot of customers are looking at more agile specialists with deep domain expertise, either in a technology stack or in a specific industry vertical or in a process function area. So I think there's, being a smaller provider with deep specialization is a virtue, right? Where we see scale becoming a limiting factor, or the lack of scale becoming a limiting factor for a lot of service providers, is where they don't necessarily have depth of specialization, right? We And Jay, to your follow-up questions, are incumbent renewals under more pressure? Yeah, absolutely. We see that, we anticipate that happening. So, the insight that Alicia was sharing, 61% of our polled enterprises suggested that they want to make changes in the portfolio, either in terms of redistributing work packages or looking at alternative sources, right? So it's all up, it's all in the mix, right? And I
And
think
we've
it's an
seen this
exciting market.
globally. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we've seen this globally as well. I think 2023, we saw a lot of these large scale vendor consolidation exercise happening specifically in the North America market. And it was primarily the incumbents which were under a lot of pressure. There were meaningfully large deals by very large service providers who were lost in this entire exercise of vendor consolidation. And of course, a lot of smaller service providers also lost because enterprises just wanted to rationalize the number of providers that they have to deal with. So any incumbent, yes, will be under a lot of pressure to demonstrate value, to demonstrate the outcomes that they have been able to deliver through their entire engagement duration.
Yeah, yeah, and that's also what makes it an exciting market, because in a lot of ways, customers are looking for better choice, right, and more choice in terms of engagement models, in terms of who they work with, how they engage, so on and so forth, right? Alicia, let me throw this back to you a little bit, right? So we spoke about the GIC GBS model, right? And what's interesting to note is that there's this shift or this stated preference, right? what's some of the value that enterprises are seeking from their GBS or GICs?
Yeah. That's an interesting question, CJ. And I was actually reading it last evening itself. There are enough and more examples of very large organizations globally trying to focus on their GBS centers not anymore as a cost center or a backend, but more as an innovation hub. This is where a lot of focus from net new product development happens, net new product engineering is happening there, innovation in terms of experimentation with generative AI is happening in these areas. Because if you look at it, the talent is right there, right? It's the same talent who the service providers have access to, say in India or in Philippines or anywhere else, and it's the same talent that the GBS centers have access to. The benefit that enterprises get out of these GBS centers is an undivided focus and attention towards innovation for that enterprise, which in a lot of cases for service providers just gets diffused because they are focusing on so many enterprises at the same time. You may not be the biggest account and may not get the most value and the highest attention from the leadership, and the maximum amount of proactive investment in automation that can actually happen doesn't happen as much as it happens in the GBS centers, because it's chicken and egg story for the service providers, right? They're investing in automation. They're also, it's like throwing yourself underwater or under the bus yourself, because you know that until and unless you expand the share of the wallet, you'll not be able to grow your business meaningfully. So it's a two-way, it's a double-edged sword for the service providers, and that's what enterprises have started to realize. Innovation, attention, talent. Also, I think it could also be about the IP protection, because of the overall competition that's happening in the market, the overall geopolitical situation, the threat of cyber attacks, and a lot of these situations that happen, it is leading to enterprises rethinking their strategies from a global sourcing standpoint. But at the same time, CJ, what do you think? Is it really a threat only for the service providers? Or do you also see some streaks of opportunities here as we think about this entire, global sourcing ecosystem gradually shifting in different directions?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point, right? So I think first up, what you described is very insightful. I think the preference for GBS is fundamentally driven by perceptions around value as well as risk, right? So it's not just cost, it's a little bit of a value and a risk consideration that's driving that preference. The second thing that I'll say is, mature GBS organizations, or even enterprises which are looking to just establish GCCs or GBS organizations, right? That affords an opportunity to third parties as well, because mature GCCs and GBSs are actually playing a key role in managing third party relationships and working with third parties in a partnership model rather than a competition model. At the same time, what we are seeing is there's a lot of activity around helping enterprises set up GCCs through a build, operate, transfer kind of model, because the value proposition there is really around managing the upfront investment within reasonable proportions, as well as a faster path to scaling the GCC. Which otherwise, on its own, most enterprises would take significantly longer unless they were to go through a third party partnership route. So there's potentially, a win-win in that GCC setup partnership model. What it does require is an openness to investment and an openness to cultural integration. Because I think the biggest challenge in that model when you're going through the third party route to establish a GCC is how do you establish the parent organization culture and scale it rapidly. Um, Does that
Yes.
answer your question, Alicia?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's both an opportunity. Of course, it's a risk because it's the same share of the pie which gets distributed, but then it's equally a big an opportunity for service providers if they channelize their energies right. Ultimately, it's serving the enterprise. It's serving them by helping them establish those GCCs, scale those GCCs, help them operationalize it in the best possible manner with the best practices, etc., or doing it themselves. I mean, it's just the way you look at that whole opportunity segment. There's
Yep.
a very interesting
Abs-
question again from Jay. New types of work streams. Are you seeing significant outcome-based pricing? Requests from clients are still T&M, fixed price, or preferred method? Um, so this is a very interesting question, and definitely not something we're hearing for the first time. I think every few months we hear this question, and this is from both service provider side and from enterprises because both want to move towards that outcome base, but it's easier said than done. The reason being there are way too many challenges when it comes to engaging in an outcome based construct, more challenges from an enterprise standpoint in terms of being able to measure, being able to attribute that success. Having said that, is it happening or not? Yes, definitely it's happening. Is it increasing? Definitely it's increasing. From a service provider standpoint, it's more of a positioning that we are willing to invest in your ecosystem. We are willing to put some of our profits and some of our revenue at risk because we are committed to the outcomes that you desire. But is that something that's happening on the ground? Are all the proposals actually getting converted into a outcome based engagement? Very, very few. If you look at 100 proposals, and these are not 100 deals, 100 proposals, say like 7 to 8 proposals per deal, only about 4% of them will actually get converted into an outcome based engagement. So it's very, very few right now. Having said that, is it something and service providers can ignore? No, it is. In fact, we are hearing this from a lot of different providers that generative AI and outcome based engagement, two things which are becoming the de facto expectation by service providers over the past 6 months and will only continue to increase over the next few months and years, are these two things. Do you have a point of view? Do you have an investment focus towards generative AI? Include that as part of your proposal, as part of your pitch. Are you willing to invest in an outcome based? Yes, no, include that as part of the pitch. How? Include that as part of the pitch. These two are becoming like the obvious expectations from enterprises, none of them converting, interestingly, into on the ground action, but definitely part of each and every proposal.
Yeah, now you've gone ahead and done it, Alicia. You have uttered the
Yes.
G word, right? So we might as well get into it, right? Let's talk a little bit about Gen AI, and I think our audience is also keen to hear about it. I see a couple of questions on Gen AI. Um, what we really see in Gen AI in APAC? How much of it is hype? How much of it is real? What's really going on there?
Yeah. So, 2023 was essentially the year of experimentations. 24 is going to be not the year of large scale adoption, but the year of pilots, serious pilot and POC implementation. It's still some time ahead in future when we can expect that hockey stick adoption to take place because there are way too many organizational limitations, organizational readiness, the tech stack alignment, the ROI question, too many things for the enterprise to solve for before they can adopt generative AI at scale across the enterprise. And that's what we heard as part of this survey that we did as well. Only about 15% enterprises in APAC said that they want to implement generative AI extensively across various processes in their organization, and there were a very few handful, 9% of them, who did not have any specific plans in place yet to invest in generative AI. All the others, more than 75%, were focusing on investing in generative AI either selectively across processes or trying to explore the use cases, conduct a pilot, or do some POC, something around generative AI to be able to better prepared in the latter part of 24 or early part of 25 to be able to make meaningful investment in generative AI. And
Yeah,
if we go ahead.
No, it's interesting because, what I see is, so first of all, we believe the technology is real, right? And it has massive long-term potential and is very disruptive in a lot of fundamental ways, right? Having said that, right, the real question here is what's going to scale versus not, right? And we really look at it from two angles. One is Gen AI embedded in traditional global services delivery. So, be it IT, be it contact center, be it process and operations work. So, Gen AI there is kind of just a continuum from your traditional process automation. So that's really where we see significant opportunity for driving productivity improvements, quality outcomes, so on and so forth, right? So, for example, in the world of application testing, quality assurance, we see significant opportunities for Gen AI in driving faster, better, and more efficient outcomes, right? The second part of it is how do we use Gen AI in very transformational use cases, right? And I think that is where, while there's a lot of creativity and innovation that's going on, a lot of those use cases are still very micro use cases. And where there's a lot of exhaustive piloting that needs to be done before we get to a point where there's potentially um, a leap of faith in terms of scaling, right? Alicia, does that match your observation?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, CJ. So there's a lot of initial investment that enterprises are prepping up for, and that's where they need support from the service providers as well. As we ask them this question on what is your expectation from service providers when it comes to generative AI, the first and foremost expectation they had was um, to support them from a thought leadership standpoint, to help them navigate the challenges of how, where, what of generative AI. How should they think about this journey? Uh, where should they start and how should they think about scaling it? What are the other investments they need to do as a preparation for making the best use out of it and for being able to scale it and drive the outcomes that they expect? Because think about it, right? If the data strategy in the beginning isn't in place, how can you think about training the model or investing in model and deriving the right outcomes out of it, and then not running into compliance and regulatory issues because of the biases or data leaks or a lot of other challenges that are bound to happen if not taken care of proactively. So that's where most of the enterprises are at this stage.
Yeah, and I think, what I'm seeing is successful implementation and the path from pilot to production is critically dependent on having a multidisciplinary approach, right? So it's not just technology teams, but you need specialist business teams. You need people who understand not just the architecture, but also the ethics and compliance part of it, right? And in the absence of having all of those people coming together and driving towards a solution, a lot of these pilots are failing at one point or the other, right? So I would say that currently, out of every 10 pilots that we see, give or take, right, I'll probably say that, you know, one or two are probably going into full scale production, right? But even though it's early days, so I would expect that number to increase over a period of time as the technology, the available talent pool, everything matures, the costs become more manageable around Gen AI, right? So we expect that to get better and better, right? But right now it's the phase of experimentation and exhaustive piloting.
Yeah, and I think if we think about APAC, and of course, different countries within APAC behave differently, but there seems to be a lot of promise from the region, and there is meaningful investment at an organization, at a government level as well. See, for example, South Korea has issued guidelines around AI-based model for financial services in specific, or recently, Singapore government had a collaboration. There was an overall partnership that was announced with Google for AI adoption, generative AI adoption. So there are a lot of developments happening in pockets across the APAC region. Overall, the government taking a lot of strong stance and initiative towards cybersecurity, towards partnership with hyperscalers, towards ensuring there is a structured approach, there's a framework towards how enterprises think about generative AI. So overall, the region seems to be a lot more positive, if I may say, tending a lot more positive, and is expected to show results as quickly as some of the global large enterprises in North America and UK.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, one of the things which all of us need to keep an eye on is what Gen AI can potentially, and the productivity and cost benefits unlocked by Gen AI, what it does to sourcing choices for a lot of customers, because it's an additional lever which can start impacting how people think of shoring decisions, for example, because it gives an alternative to the arbitrage economic benefits, right? It starts impacting how people think of the choices between GBS and third parties, something that we spoke about, right? Because the economics of service delivery start getting affected. So it's an additional lever, and people have more choice to play around with some of it and arrive at alternative choices and make different trade offs in those decisions. So that's going to be a very interesting dynamic to look at, right? I think what it also does is what we have seen in a lot of situations is that whenever there's a disruptive technology, it inevitably creates opportunities for market share shifts, right? Because it's a question of it fundamentally changes the economics of the model, right? And that's again going to be one of the things which is going to drive more competition in the market, right? So all of these are very interesting things to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And as CJ mentioned a while ago, we are happy to have a conversation on any of these points. Feel free to request for a complimentary discussion, and we'll be happy to get on a call if you want to discuss about the generative AI trends in APAC in detail, or the GBS, or in terms of the spend on different anything that you believe you may benefit from our study or from this discussion. We'll be happy to have a conversation.
Absolutely. And don't forget to sign up for our complimentary briefing on forecasts for the APAC region. We'd love to hear from you and leave your questions, comments, your observations on the APAC market in the chat window. From our side, we're going to wrap up in the next 30 seconds. So what are we really saying? We believe that in the first half of the year, growth will continue to remain a little bit muted. GBS model will grow faster than third-party services models. We believe that there's going to be significant potential for share shifts in third-party portfolios. There's going to be a lot of vendor portfolio rationalization initiatives. Finally, we believe that Gen AI is something that we are very excited about. Having said that, there's a note of caution. We believe there are going to be there's going to be a lot of fail fast with a lot of pilots being driven, not all of which will move to production, but there's real opportunity to embed Gen AI into traditional global services delivery that creates distinctive opportunities to change service delivery economics, right? That's a wrap from our side. Love to hear from you. Keep your questions, keep your comments coming. Till the next time we speak again, signing out. Have a great day and have a great rest of the week ahead. Cheers.
Have a good day ahead. Bye bye.